Hi, I'm Edie Cunningham, and I'm here to take a moment or two to tell you about something special to me I've used many times when teaching kids called a dry erase board. And you can buy them for about $13 at Staples office supply store, or you can order them online through Oriental Trading Company.com. So that would be a really easy way to get them. You can also get all the supplies. And I enjoy using the dedicated epoxy whiteboard care for erasing and cleansing. The Expo eraser, which is sort of a felt material. And I love their markers. They're real fat and juicy. And some of them even have a little magnetic back on the back, a strip on the back of the marker. So that's handy because not all boards are like this one. Some boards are metal, and therefore the magnetic strip sticks in place. So there's your eraser handy all the time, or you can buy these little clips for the top and always have your eraser handy. So I'm going to talk about the value of this in your teaching because I think it's been great. But I should say this. I have an example of something never to use on your dry erase board. Never use a permanent marker on your dry erase board. It will damage it forever. You won't be able to get the markings off. I remember one time I was teaching and that happened. And I was erasing it and it wouldn't move. So be careful that you know the difference between the two. Now I want to tell you, you probably have seen a man named Karl Rove on Fox Nation. And he uses one of those little things. Now, he's a highly professional man, and he's using a dry erase board to give his political stats, you know. So that's kind of cool. So you got a better reason than that for using them. One thing, as I said, you can do is just introduce yourself. The kids sometimes will call you Miss or Mr., but I'll just say, my name is Edie. And remember to write in little letters, not caps, all the way through for children. That will help them a lot to catch what you're saying. When you're in a class of kids, did you ever wonder what their favorite word is? You know, I've had people guess at this and they say, oh, the word love. Kids love love. Well, I'll tell you what the most wonderful word in all the world is. It's a child's name. So, you know what? Maybe at the beginning of class, if you didn't know the kids in your class, you could give them a pen and they could all trade off and come up and write their name on the board and go back and sit down afterwards, and they get to see their name up all through class. They love to write on a marker board. And particularly they like to see their name. It's their favorite word in the whole world. So you can use your whiteboard to introduce yourself, take the class roster, assign chores, write those down. You can also use it to make lists. You know, sometimes we sit in prayer. When I was teaching at clubs all the time in Portland, we used to sit in a little prayer circle at the end of the day and we'd try to capture the essence of the lesson, what God was telling us. And then we'd pray about things and people. So one of the best ideas you can use your marker board is to pre-write the prayer requests that the kids might have or you might have, and they won't have to try to remember because you'll have them all on the board, even if they peek a little bit. That's okay, right? And they can look at what you've written on the board for a class prayer request. Now, I love to, when I'm teaching, use a board to write with, as I said, and you can too, and I think you'll really love this one. You can hold it real close. It's just a little handheld one. Most classrooms have huge whiteboards or mounted on walls, but this little one is kind of handy. And you can write Bible references if you want them to turn to something in the Bible. Here's a verse in 2 Kings chapter 19, verse 25, and I'm giving you that reference because I want to ask a question. How many people were in the enemy army that were going to wipe Israel out? And the kids would look in their Bibles, and they might, if they have a a translation that's old, it might say, an hundred, this is really a long one, 100 for, excuse me, score and 5,000. What I'd like to do is, if the kids do have that, I'd like to write it down and see if they can figure out one angel from God's army angel was fighting against this many enemies of Israel. Can you figure how many that is from those words? What you could do afterwards, teacher, after you ask that question, you could put the ratio, and what will really surprise them is when they see you write the number of enemy soldiers on the board. 185,000 to one angel. Wow, that sounds impossible to win, but guess what? That one angel wiped that whole Assyrian army out. So when they see it written on the board like that, it can be rather effective to show the contrast in detail. So let me just write that on there and continue on. I know I like to use the whiteboard when I'm teaching at Camp Good News, kids' classes, 11 to 13 I think I teach usually. And I remember one summer when I was teaching, there was a young girl, 11, and she had the hardest time memorizing the Bible verses. Every cabin of girls was trying to join a competitive contest to see if they could learn all the assigned verses, one a day from my Bible class. Well, this one girl probably was a little bit educationally challenged, but you just had to love her because she couldn't learn the verse, and her cabin were very upset because if she learned the verse, they got extra points toward winning the big contest for the week. So they were very upset with her, and so therefore that was kind of excluding her from part of their fun in the cabin. So I caught on to that one day when she just wasn't saying she could learn the verse any longer. She tried and tried. So I said, oh, I know how you can do it. So I showed her a method to memorize the verse, and she got it. And then the rest of the week, she got it. There's an old memory method called Ben Johnson stacking and exaggerating. You can't even find the book anymore on the internet. But all he does is take a Bible verse, and he puts icons on the board, and he stacks them one on top of the other, and you can either pre-write it or write it as you talk. And I'll just quote the one I hear. It will be in the PowerPoint. You'll see it on the board, okay? The icons that I've written. And so I'll quote it. How blessed is the man who does not walk in the counsel of the wicked, nor stand in the path of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of the scoffers, Psalm 1:1. And you can see that when the videography is done, this PowerPoint will show you two different ways of doing that, and you can do it right in class. You can stack and exaggerate like Ben Johnson does. And so then, let's just say I've made the icons on the board. I won't take all the time to do that. I've made all the icons, and they go up in a row, and as she looks at those icons, they begin to bring back words and phrases that are in Psalm 1. And then the next challenge is I go, all right, I'm going to erase one, I'm going to erase two, and pretty soon they're all gone. I put the board down. Guess what? That girl had it right up here because God somehow created our brains not to remember everything we hear. It's a good thing, isn't it? But he made it so a visual helps us retain information longer. So it's simple little icons that you can use will help people to learn verses. Because the Bible was written in an entirely different culture and so long ago, kids will really appreciate seeing words from the Bible written in there. They'll appreciate on the whiteboard. They'll appreciate seeing Bible maps. Where did Paul's journey take them? And you can just make simple maps. You can make a map of Abraham's journey all the way from Ur of Chaldeans to the Promised Land. You could make timelines. I remember just last week I was writing a lesson on the life of Cain, and I realized, wow, Genesis is so packed with genealogy. And so I thought, wow, I'm going to use that sometime on the whiteboard and make a genealogy of Cain. A genealogy from Adam and Eve to Cain and so on. Even their great-grandkids are mentioned there. The important individuals in their family are listed there. You can write key words. When I was working in the book of Genesis a few weeks ago, I saw a contrast, and I think I'd really like to use it when I teach. God said, you say it with me if you know it, it is good when he created everything, right? And he got to the last day, and he said, it is very good. Can't you just hear him shouting that? And all the angels singing with him. But words like that written on the board that are key from your lesson will really help the kids to catch that. You know, it's really fun with kids is playing review games on the board. I like doing that with kids, and they especially love to play tic-tac-toe, two competitive teams, and X and O and blah, 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 And so it's a lot of fun to see them play that on the board. So you can keep score on the board, play games on the board, write key words on the board, draw maps. There was a man named Noah who lived in the town of Joppa on the shores of Israel. And he was asked to go to where? Nineveh. When you tell the kids the difference between where he was asked to go by God and where he went, when you write down those miles, they will drop their mouths wide open. If he had obeyed God, he would have gone from Joppa to Nineveh, and that is, let's see if I got the miles right here, 550 miles. That's a long way in those days, isn't it? Hoofing it to Nineveh to tell those people about God. But instead, he ran away in disobedience, and he went all the way to a country you know well, Spain, which was 2,500 miles away from where he was supposed to be. So just writing stats on the board is a dramatic way to sink a fact into a kid's heart and head. This is something that would be kind of cool. You can either use paper or buy 5 or 6 of these personal size dry erase boards, and you can give them to a group of children or to one child or all the kids if you've got enough money to buy them all. And then you can call them personal response boards. You'll see that in the PowerPoint, personal response boards. And you can ask them questions like this and give them a pen and expect them to just think about the answer. You can say, students, what is the answer to this question? Write it on your personal response board. And then look around the room now and you all compare, and you'll see the kids all have different answers and they'll kind of be chuckling a little bit. Or then you could say, now all of you stand up who put true for that question, for that answer. And it's just kind of fun to have a personal response board because it gets them listening a little bit harder, to just pushes the edge there a little bit, pushes them forward to listening harder. And then it will help in their retention factor too. You'll see at the end in a diagram if they learn to write something about the lesson. Because the Bible was written in a different culture and a different time, you might want to use your whiteboard to explain doctrinal truths. What is the Trinity? And just write those words so they don't just hear you, but they see it in spelling. What is faith? Karen and I were just at a training conference at our home office, and we had to define some of these words, and even as adults, it's quite a challenge. What is salvation? So when they see those Bible words, they have a lot of fun trying to define them with them, even draw icons to help them to understand. There's something in my PowerPoint slides you'll see is called a bean people, a Bible bean people. And you'll notice that you can go to a clip art library and turn up this thing called Bean People. It doesn't have the word Bible in it, but you can use it in your Bible story making. This is an example of using sort of bean people or just, little sketches to tell the story of Abraham. If you don't have visuals, you can just use these and you can draw them right on your whiteboard. That would be kind of cool, wouldn't it? And I just think that's an excellent little idea to help them to retain the information, especially if you have a short lesson with no visuals. You can adapt and transfer information, like in the Rose publication books. That's really a handy book to have, and you can transfer information from that. In the Bible, it speaks of an alabaster jar that a woman used in her worship for Jesus. And it doesn't look like it's worth much when you say it's, worth 300 denarii. But when you put that into today's culture, it's worth $54,000. So you can see how valuable her worship was. And that's why Judas kind of hung his tongue out when she did that. Sometimes kids are trying to learn the books of the New Testament, Old Testament, and they'll get to a word like this one right here, and they'll think it was some Italian guy who wrote it, Malachi. And it'll be laughed at by the other kids, but if you spell it right out and say, no, it's Malachi, that's different, isn't it? So it's a help even to write out all these kind of words that we take as familiar, cities and places. And I know some people hear other words in the Bible that are used, and they'll kind of laugh at them, and they'll say, what is lard? No, the word isn't lard, it's nard. And then you'll hear other words too, and they'll go, parables. What is that? A pair of bells? And so you can define it right on the board. And I'm rushing so I don't have to write every word to talk to you right now, but that's a big help when you put some of those common words to you right on the board. Important dates are really critical. When the capture of Jerusalem at one point was 587 years before Jesus was born. That's a critical date in Israel's history. You can write important dates. And you can also use emojis. Do you know what emojis are? You've seen the PowerPoint. There's all kinds of them. Think about this question. Which emoji would you pick out of the 15 that I've listed on the PowerPoint to describe Cain's defiance of God? Which one would you pick? Which one would you pick when you see a person who's sad and repenting? You can use these right beside the Bible verse when you're teaching in your lesson. And lastly, I'd like to say the idea of using visuals is to help ramp up the retention level of your students. Looking at the PowerPoint now, you'll notice that if we just talk, there's only 5% retention level. But if we involve auditory, listening, visual, seeing, and touching, if they can get up and you write a word on the board, you get involved with those icons and so on, the retention level rises and rises with audio visuals and demonstrations and discussions like the personal board that they can write on. So I hope you'll try it in your class and find these principles will help you. Thanks.